Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I wanted to talk about a topic that I've been asked about quite a bit, and it's something that is kind of it's interesting to think about because of the timeline of Dead City, and that is, did Negan already reunite with Rick? Like, does Negan already know at this point in Dead City that, Rick already made it back? Because the timeline for this show is a couple years after Daryl Dixon, a couple years, it seems, after the ones who live. So is it possible that Maggie and Negan already know that Rick has made it back to Alexandria? Like, do they already know sort of what has happened? Has that reunion already happened off screen? So I want to get into this here. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this, but let's jump into this idea here. So, does Negan already know that Rick Grimes is back in Alexandria? So, obviously the idea here is that, Dead City, first of all, it's set a few years after Daryl Dixon, it seems like, because Daryl Dixon seems to be set within, like, what, a year or so after, maybe it's 6 months, up to a year or something after the very ending of the Walking Dead final episode. And so the Walking Dead final episode, obviously, it jumps forward a year. Daryl Dixon is set 6 months to a year later or something afterwards. And so he's been there for a while. I think Dead City is rumored to be set like 2 to 3 years or something after that episode. And so overall, it seems like Daryl Dixon is set like 2 years behind Dead City. And so the ones who live, as of right now, no one really knows when it's set. The rumor right now is that it's sort of set around the same time as Daryl Dixon. And so it's about a year or so afterwards, or maybe it's set around the time of, when Daryl, I guess, leaves the Commonwealth or leaves Alexandria. I guess he leaves the Commonwealth in the final episode. And so obviously we don't know the exact timeline yet. And so this could be, very, very different. It could be set a year or two later. But for sure, Dead City is set like 2 or 3 years later. And it's definitely far enough in the future that, if the ones who live is one season and this is sort of it for Rick Grimes, then yeah, obviously that would make sense that, Maggie and Negan would, I guess, have found out that he came back, right? That Rick and Michonne made it back, or I guess whoever dies, right? Like if someone dies or something like that, like they already kind of know that information. And so, is that possible? Obviously it is very possible. I will say the one thing with this idea though is that The Walking Dead is very, very bad with timelines. Like they've always been so bad with timelines, and they will reference things later on where it's like, yeah, that was 7 years ago. When you add everything up, it's like, no, it's like 8.5 years ago. Or, all of All Out War took place within like a month or two or something like that. Like, I don't know, there's just a lot of things like that where they've just handled the timeline, not that great. And it's frustrating, obviously, if you're a Walking Dead fan, because you're trying to sort of place the shows kind of together and like what makes sense kind of thing. But a lot of it I feel like is just kind of just made up here and there, and it's just like it's a very general feeling on like where the characters are at and what the timeline overall is. And it's why it's kind of hard to say with a lot of characters, like Dwight and Sherry, they're going back to the sanctuary. Morgan is going back as well, and we don't know when the show is set, but like they said 7 years later. It's generally, Fear the Walking Dead ends about 11 years in. So, you can't really compare that timeline overall with what's happening on The Walking Dead, because it's never going to really line up. You're just going to have to assume that, they're generally meaning that Fear the Walking Dead and The Walking Dead end at the exact same time, basically, right? So that's why I think that with Dead City, the thing about this show that makes it a little different is that it is set, kind of farther in the future, because Herschel is much older, right? So they're actually saying that he is a lot older, which obviously at that point there, Judith and RJ would be much older as well, right? And so again, I think that, in terms of the other shows, some of this stuff really might not matter overall in terms of all the specifics, but Dead City is farther enough away that it kind of makes some sense that it's possible that Negan already knows that Rick made it back to Alexandria. And so in this scenario, that would mean that, a possible reunion between the two could have happened off screen, but we'll talk about that in a second here. Carol did also mention that someone came back. Obviously, I still think overall that she was referencing Dwight, just because I don't think they would just like give away the fact that Rick came back, right? Like that's the one thing about The Ones Who Live and like just Scott Gimple and The Walking Dead in general is like they hold a lot of information back, and when it comes to Rick, they never give us stuff like that. Like literally in the final season, there were references that the Commonwealth were aware of the CRM. There were so many references to things like that, but like they never gave us that. There was never confirmation. There was just like these little things that just like opened up the doors to like all these different, possibilities, but they'll never confirm it because it's fun to speculate about, right? But to confirm it, I mean, I don't know. I think if you confirmed that and you start to world build like that, it's a lot of fun. But they introduce a lot of ideas like this. They get people excited. It's usually never sort of what it is, right? Or if it is, they just kind of like leave it there. And that's why I do think that the Commonwealth was referencing the CRM. It's just that we're never going to know. Like, we're never going to hear about that unless in The Ones Who Live, there's a specific, like, discussion about, like, oh, yeah, we have, like, communications with, like, these groups or, like, whatever, or, like, with the Commonwealth, and we know that Alexandria is a part of the Commonwealth now kind of thing, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, unless they confirm something there, then we'll look back at The Walking Dead final season and be like, okay, so all of that makes sense, but do we really think we're going to see that or hear that in The Ones Who Live? I don't know, unless Jadis mentioned something, but at this point, it feels like it's probably not going to be a thing, so going back to what Carol said, right? Like, Carol mentions that someone came back. And so is that a reference to the fact that Rick did come back, right? Again, I just feel like that's a little bit too much of a scene, too much information to just give away like that. And especially considering, Andrew Lincoln, like, I feel like a big part of the promotion for The Ones Who Live really, and again, I don't know this at all. This is literally just my opinion, but I feel like it's being done based off of, Andrew Lincoln's reaction to how his final episodes were sort of promoted, because how they were promoted, I think he had big issues with overall because of the fact that it was already announced, right? Like, I think he was surprised that the whole Rick movie trilogy stuff never came out, but like his departure and all of that already came out, and Robert Kirkman, I think, spoiled that on like some sort of Comic-Con thing, and he seemed to be very, very upset about that because he even mentioned it during the panel kind of thing, right? Because I think he wanted it to be a big surprise. And I know one of the things that he was saying was that he wanted people to just like watch the show and just see the moment happen when Rick left the show and be like, wait, what? And just be completely shocked, like having a big moment like that. So that's why when I look at The Ones Who Live, I think that's a big thing. I think in terms of this show getting a season 2 or anything, like, they're really going to keep it completely secret until really, I guess, the show comes out, or really literally the show ending, right? Like, as soon as that final episode airs, I think that's when they'll say, okay, yeah, we're going to do a season 2. And I don't know if that is something that has worked into their contracts, because the one thing is, like, AMC has not really been asked about anything to do with a season 2. Like, there hasn't been anyone that has really asked. Well, actually, there was one article that was, I think it was EW. I could be wrong, so I'm not going to say it was EW exactly, but it was someone, it was like a website that has obviously a lot of credibility, and they asked AMC whether or not there was going to be more than one season, and there was a mention of like, it's sort of up in the air. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's sort of like, it's one of those things where it's like they don't really know, or it's possible, but they don't really know. Like, I know they didn't really give an answer, but it was very much a non-answer. Like, that's pretty much what it was. It was like a non-answer. And if you really think about the promotion of this show and the discussion of this show, and just like whenever Scott Gimple or anyone has been asked about like a season 2 or anything like that, I mean, first of all, they haven't really been asked that a lot. There's just been a lot of like non-answers to a lot of that, so that's why, to me, I think a lot of that goes back to, again, like Andrew Lincoln really wanting these things to be a surprise and really wanting fans to like experience these moments, in a really amazing way. And again, that's sort of my opinion. That's just kind of how I've like viewed everything overall, just because, I mean, I think it's smart. It definitely is smart, because a lot of people, they're wondering about this stuff, and people are going to be so hyped. And I know there's going to be some people that are just very like, oh, I don't know, it doesn't seem like we're going to get a season 2 kind of thing. And then if they do announce a season 2, imagine the fan excitement. Imagine it's like the end of March, season 1 is ending, and then they announce they're doing a season 2. There's no release date yet, obviously, but they're doing a season 2, and then season 1 ends on a crazy cliffhanger, and just the excitement at that point, right? Like, it's going to be really insane. And so that's why I think that, they don't want to announce before season 1 has even aired that they're doing a season 2. I think they just want to kind of see, are fans really liking this? They just want to see the fan reaction and what things are going to be like. And there's a lot of promotion for The Ones Who Live. There's a lot of stuff coming out for this show, and there's been some rumors of some, of Rick and Michonne appearing in some games and stuff like that, and so there's a lot here. And so going back to my original point, I really feel like they're just going to be keeping a lot of this stuff a secret. And so, Carol mentioning someone came back, I don't think that makes a lot of sense for her to say that that was Rick and Michonne. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It really doesn't. I think that was a reference to Dwight or Morgan, and I think that was more of a world building scene for like Dead City, because it seems like Daryl Dixon is going to be coming out before Dead City. I think Dead City is supposed to be filming soon, because Jeffrey Dean Morgan, I know, posted somewhere on Twitter that, or X, sorry, but I know he posted somewhere, he replied to a fan of when could we expect some more Dead City news, and I think he just found out something about filming and all that, and he was gonna, or there was supposed to be an update or something soon, and so I imagine that they know when they're going to be filming. It's probably going to be early in 2024, obviously, and so I'm expecting Dead City to come out at some point, like very, very late of 2024, probably in like October, November, and then I guess we'll have to see, obviously, for the next year, or maybe they're hoping for the show to come out in 2025. Maybe it takes the place of The Ones Who Live. You know, like The Walking Dead right now, I think people are trying to figure out overall the release schedule for a lot of these shows. I still think they should do 8 episodes. You know, they're doing 6 episodes constantly, and it does work, I guess. Like, for a season 1, it does work. But, you know, it's been rumored, or it seems like just based off of filming and all that, and sort of, I guess, the director or some of the people behind the scenes of Daryl Dixon, that season 2 is also going to be 6 episodes. I'm pretty sure at Comic-Con they kind of referenced it being like 12 episodes in total, this show so far. So I'm assuming that, yeah, it's going to be another 6 episodes. And I feel like that's a mistake, because that's kind of my issue with season 1 of both shows, is that it was a really good introduction to the story, but it being only 6 episodes, like, there's so many little things where I'm like, you could have expanded a little bit more there and did this. And 8 episodes to me, I think, works really, really well. You don't have to go to 10, but like 8 episodes I think would be so perfect, because I mean, I guess right now people are just trying to see, like, what are you going to be putting out there for Walking Dead content? What is 2024 going to look like? Is it just going to be The Ones Who Live, and then we're going to have pretty much the summer off until September? And then we'll have, I guess, Daryl Dixon season 2 going up until like October, mid-October again. And then I guess a break until February. And then we get Dead City season 2. And then is it going to be only 2 shows every single year? Like, is that the plan going forward? And then The Ones Who Live, if you're doing more than 1 season, that's going to be a thing that comes out every 2 or 3 years for only like maybe 2 seasons, or maybe a third if it's the final season. I think fans are just trying to figure out what's going on, because I know fans want more Walking Dead content. People want more, like, not more spin-offs, but just, I think they want Tales of the Walking Dead to be a better show. You know, season 1, I'm so sad that they really failed that, but a lot of that was the story, and like, they just chose really bad stories to do. Some of the stories were all right, but they could have done that overall better. And so I just think, going back to my original point here, that it's a lot, I think, for Carol to give information like that away. It really is. And I think that was more of a world building moment, because I do think Dead City will be coming out, like season 2 will be coming out after Daryl Dixon season 2. And so I think that was just more of a reference for them. Like, I feel like we're going to watch The Ones Who Live, and it's just going to, you know, they could tease a season 2, and then we'll watch Daryl Dixon season 2. And then I think that obviously Daryl will ask Carol, like, who came back? Like, what were you talking about? And then she'll mention like Dwight or Morgan or something like that. And then obviously we're going to be talking about, like, well, if he came back, like how does that affect the story, this and that? And then that could set up like Dead City kind of thing, or Dead City season 2, because they haven't even filmed yet, right? So if they're working on the script right now, or if they're getting ready to film, I'm assuming that the script for season 2 is already done. But like, if they were waiting for Fear the Walking Dead to end so that they can have Dwight on this show, like, it makes a lot of sense. It lines up perfectly. So I don't think Carol was mentioning Rick. And so I think that it makes a lot of sense that it is very, very possible that Negan could know that Rick is actually back now, that Rick has made it back to Alexandria. And, you know, like, I think that just, it makes sense, I think, with the overall timeline of things, unless The Ones Who Live is set a little bit later, then that is possible. You know, they could do something like that where it's set around the same time as Dead City. And so maybe it's way later in the future. I think that would be really cool as well, just because then it's more of a current timeline story. Like, I don't like the idea that, you know, a certain show is set before another show, because the show that is set before the other show almost feels like you're watching a prequel in that sense, and it's not as exciting, which is kind of weird, but that's kind of how I view it, because I want to watch the show that is set the most into the future, you know, because that's like the most, like, any references, that's sort of, you know, like, that's the current story, right? And I guess another question too is, like, would Negan even go and see Rick, right? Like, if he heard that he came back, would he even go and see him? Because at the end of The Walking Dead, Negan just kind of walked off, and yeah, Daryl said, like, you know, he nodded there, like, as a you know, a gesture of like, thank you, and like, you know, you did a lot, and there's some respect there. There's some respect between Daryl and Negan, and you know, but after that, you know, they didn't really talk to him. He walked off, and that was kind of it. And he's been away for years, and the first time he saw Maggie was, again, literally in the beginning of Dead City. So I don't know, like, if Negan heard at all that Rick made it back, I don't know if he would have been like, oh, I gotta go say hi, right? Like, do you think, like, story-wise that would make sense? I don't think so. You know, I think if anything, Rick would want to go and find Negan. And again, I don't know, like Negan's story overall for the last however long has been kind of everywhere. He's been, you know, so I don't think that that reunion would have happened off screen, but him finding out that Rick is alive off screen and just kind of having a whatever reaction to it, I think makes sense. Like that could have happened off screen. And I think that, I mean, first of all, like I wouldn't be a fan of that. And that is something that like The Walking Dead has done. And that's why when it comes to like all the reunions and all that with like certain characters, like I'm always excited for it, but like there's always this part to me where I'm like, are they going to mess it up? Because like they didn't really do a great job with Daryl's reaction, like to the idea that Rick was alive, right? Like what Judith said to him really seemed like, I mean, there was a possibility that maybe he wasn't alive or whatever. Like just what she said specifically was so vague, so general. Daryl's reaction was really nothing. If I was Daryl, I would have been freaking out. And obviously, you know, the circumstances in that scene, it was more of like Daryl was dealing with a lot. There were walkers everywhere. There was this whole battle going on. That's why I just kind of find it silly to reveal something like that in that scene. Like, why reveal that then? You could have done that at the very end of the episode, like literally at the very end, and had a more emotional scene there where maybe she talked about, you know, just gave literally specific dialogue about like my mom, you know, she found my dad's boots and she thinks he could be out there, something like that. And Daryl's like, wait, what? And then maybe Daryl goes to talk with Carol about it or some other character and is just like, she found his boots here, this and that, like he could be out there or whatever. And then just some discussion of like, well, I guess I'm going to have to go out there. And that's what I mean. That's why it shouldn't have happened in the final episode. It happening in the final episode is so much. It should have happened in like episode 22 or in 23. And then, you know, the storyline should have been like Judith was very worried, obviously, that Daryl would just go and find Rick. And then it seemed like Daryl was very much going to do that. And then obviously in episode 23, maybe the same thing happens where Judith gets hurt. And then Daryl's like, no, I have to stay here with Judith, obviously. But then it would end in some way where Judith is like, you can go and find him. Like, I'm okay, this and that. And I think that would have been a really great story right there. But instead, it was kind of told very fast. And Daryl had a very non-reaction. So, you know, all of us wanting all of these specific reactions from certain characters, I'm just like, is it going to happen though? You know, and I hope it does, because that's one thing that's going to really tie everything together. If The Walking Dead ends in a couple of years from now, that is the one thing that a lot of us, I think, are going to be so excited about. The fact that everyone reunited, some characters, maybe they die, but we get like this proper conclusion to everything. The CRM arc ends up being this really crazy war sort of thing, but everything comes to an end, everyone reunites, and like there's this final story that's maybe 6 episodes or something like that. And then that's it. You know, the Walking Dead story is done, and then they can sort of continue on to something else, because the Commonwealth arc was not that exciting. Literally the story that we got, like Dead City, first of all, was way more exciting than the Commonwealth arc, but the Daryl Dixon story, like for season 1, way more exciting. The advanced walkers and all that, way more exciting than anything that we've got on The Walking Dead in many, many years. So yeah, anyways, I guess I'll leave it here. Post your thoughts down below. Do you think the reunion with Rick and Negan already happened? Do you think it happened off screen? Or if there wasn't a reunion of any kind, do you think it was more of a thing that like Negan found out that Rick was still alive? And so could there be a reference in season 2, you know, where they talk about, you know, like maybe Negan just says, you know, when Rick came back, this and that. Like I thought it was impossible. Like it was mind blowing kind of thing. Like, I don't know. But anyways, post your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.